Well, just a little bit about me. I'm a partner and a chief marketing officer in a firm called Chief Outsiders, and there are 75 of us around the country. We've all been marketing executives for at least 25 years. That's kind of how the firm is structured. When we say we're fractional executives, what that means is we go into companies, we kind of support their leadership teams for some period of time and implement sort of better growth planning, business planning, marketing planning disciplines, kind of help source it, staff it, make sure it's a real plan. And then when the companies say, okay, we got this, then we sort of step into the background. So, that's a lot of what I'm doing these days. There are the topic that I picked for today called the intelligent sales pipeline. I want to explain a little bit about where that came from, but it's actually one of three sort of topics that I'm asked to speak about a lot. The other two being kind of growth planning, because a lot of, probably 90% of where I start working with organizations is on their growth plan. Looking out, this year all the way out to 3 to 5 years and making sure that they've got growth opportunities identified and plans to realize those new revenue and profit streams. And then I've also been a chief information officer, and so I do a lot of speaking on digital enabled transformation, because for businesses today, making the trip into the digital world it's not optional any longer. It's really pretty much a requirement given the impact of COVID on how we do business. But a little bit on my side, besides being a chief marketing officer, I'm also a licensed pastor in the Evangelical Covenant Church. And I live in Stockholm, Wisconsin, kind of down the Mississippi River, about an hour. Lived in Vadnais Heights for 19 years. So if we were meeting live and I was still living in that house, would have been an easy trip over this morning. But my wife and I sold that house and we went to London for 2 years and are living in Stockholm, population 66. So it's really, for me, it's been a blessing to be able to sort of integrate my personal, spiritual, and professional growth. And this is really a growth presentation today. And I want to talk a little bit sort of about how we maintain our health, our family relationships. Are we continuing to grow in our faith? And then professionally, we need to continue to grow. And as you can get outdated relatively quickly on sort of what are best practices in your industry, the market you're in. And a lot of what we do is really and what I do is really focus on integrating those three dimensions. Kind of interestingly enough, last week, the local Wisconsin regional newspaper asked if I'd be interested in writing a faith column. And so I said, sure. And so the 2 days after the election, my first monthly column is going to come out, which is I'm calling Faith Works. And it's really about integrating faith and work and faith. And I'm pretty excited about being able to have another sort of forum or an outlet to sort of talk about this concept. If you say, well, who are you really? I'd say, well, I had a professor. I graduated from University of Wisconsin with a master's in counseling psychology. Kathy, I think you and I probably have something in common there. And the professor, when we were graduating, went around the room and kind of everybody was characterizing the 15 of us in that program. And she said, Mark, when I think about you, I think about a sponge. And it was like, really? Is a sponge a good thing? But then, she explained it further and she said, whatever you want to continue to learn more. And that's why we were actually talking about Jeremiah 29:11 already this morning, right? What is God's plan for us, and are we open to that? And how do we discern what that is? And the spiritual dimension of integrating business and faith and business. I've got to hear Ed Silvoso speak in the 90s in the Twin Cities numerous times, and I just think that was probably one of the more influential books that I ever read. Certainly an empowering book, and then people who know me, I'm always attracted to growth. And, my wife and I have been part of 2 church startups, started up numerous businesses. And I think the whole concept of growth is very biblically based too. I have a little hobby vineyard, so I wouldn't say I'm like Noah, but I do like to just grow things. And so where does this notion of an intelligent sales pipeline come from? And, I like to say, I was spoiled early in my career. My first business position was a sales position, selling, $15,000 software packages over the phone. I had 50 prospects when I joined this company. And over the period of about a year and a half, I was able to close 49 of them. The one I couldn't close was in Taiwan and couldn't figure out how to pay me in US dollars. And that company grew 100% 6 years in a row. So you talk about being spoiled early in your career, right? Because this notion of, putting 50 prospects in and getting 49 customers out I thought that's the way the world should operate. And I thought that every company should grow 100% annually, right? And then you kind of go on in your career and you realize how unusual and how unique that sort of early learning really was. But I never lost this idea of driving more efficient and effective revenue management. And I'd like to share this approach with you today. Obviously, I'll send you this deck as part of the follow-up. I've got an ebook you can read on this topic. I'll include a link to that. It's a free download. And hopefully you'll see some application to your organization as we get into this. So, I don't even like to use the word funnel. People talk about sales funnels, and it's like, could we use the word pipeline instead? Because to me, a funnel is a very inefficient way and a very flawed way. And actually, the original idea of a sales funnel was developed by a gentleman named E. St. Elmo Lewis in 1898. And he was kind of considered one of the early sort of fathers of modern marketing. But the whole idea was that, you basically sort of threw a bunch of people in the top of the funnel and try to force everybody through a process of conversation and dialogue to sort of see you as the only alternative at the bottom of the funnel, right? And that doesn't work anymore because people don't want to follow your process. They don't want to follow the buyer's journey that you want. Dumping a bunch of unqualified leads into the top of the funnel just isn't economical. You have quality control issues. And so, my whole point about this is, there might have been a time and place for a traditional funnel model, but today it's not the right way to think about your revenue management processes. So I developed this concept called an intelligent sales pipeline. It's different. It's different because of three things. One of them is it uses intelligence. So when you think about how organizations qualify prospects today, right? They'll say, I talked to somebody, now they're 10% qualified. Or, I did a demo for somebody, now they're 50% qualified. Or I sent them a contract, now they're 90% qualified. Well, a lot of those 90% qualified never turn into customers because, frankly, task-based qualification is not really an effective way of measuring your pipeline, nor is it an effective way of developing a forecast. So there is a better way I'll talk about here in just a minute. Engagement is different also today. We have multiple ways of talking with prospects, trying to understand their pain points, their needs, their challenges. And it's more efficient and works much better if you start with targeted prospects rather than a giant mass of suspects. And today we have the ability to measure things more effectively. And that means that, we can start with higher quality, better fit prospects at the start of the interaction and then track them. And it really sort of represents a reprioritization of quality leads over quantity leads. So there are really kind of three main parts of this whole model. Target business identification on the far left, developing ideal profiles, which are this concept of sort of an ideal customer or an ideal client or an ideal patient is just trying to describe who is it that you would like to do business with? Who do you think you serve best? And once we understand that, we can figure out how to implement a focused lead generation program. We can use intelligent qualification, which means that when you built that ideal profile, you said, gee, I like companies this size and this location with these needs. And when we put in an intelligent qualification process, now we're scoring leads based on those qualifications, not a task-based process. And because we're developing a higher quality, sort of narrower pipeline, our ability to manage the pipeline improves. We have a stronger closing rate, and our ability to forecast our business going forward is improved as well. So lots of benefits from starting to think about a pipeline versus a funnel. Now, the intelligent sales pipeline, in the heart of any business, is sort of who you are, right? What is your value proposition? Who are you? How do you create value for the businesses or the consumers that you want to serve? And how are you different, right? When you look at this page, this is a client I did some work with earlier this spring. And on the left is sort of who they were before we got our hands into kind of refining their value proposition and their positioning, right? So yeah, okay, they're a construction company. Look at how we changed their value proposition on the right? So if you look at the word cloud on the right, you wouldn't even need to read about this company to get a pretty decent idea of who they are and how they create value, right? We're focusing on their expertise, their design support, project management capabilities, and the fact that they can do work at a lower cost than most of their competitors. So this is really kind of the heart of an intelligent sales pipeline. It's really understanding who you are first, and then we have to sort of match that against the grand slam customers or the ideal customer profile that you really want, right? I've written an article and with a friend called Todd Eberhardt. We've done a radio show. I do have a radio program and a podcast called The Practical CMO. And I've interviewed Todd on that show. Todd's got a great definition of who an ideal customer profile is. And his definition is, describe the characteristics of a client, or if you could get 100 more, you jump at the chance, right? And a lot of times the way you start to identify who your ideal client is by looking at who you've served effectively in the past and what is it about them that made them such a great fit for your business. So now we're starting to marry who you are, that's your value proposition, with the target customers that you want to serve. And once we do that, then we can kind of take a step forward in terms of the qualification process. So, when we start to qualify customers, we really want to start at the bottom of this pyramid, which is sort of, because a lot of times people in sales, someone will call in and they'll go to, right away, they'll start a product pitch, right? And instead of being quiet and asking the right questions, and the right questions are typically sort of, tell me a little bit about the company, your strategy, your problems, your issues. Then we get up to the second level about, okay, so what is it you're trying to accomplish, right? Why is this product or service going to be critical to you? And then the third level is very important today. There's a whole body of work on neuromarketing, which basically says people buy because of a combination of emotional and rational decisions, but emotional decisions are really driven by the primal brain, and they're pretty important. So you need to understand what's in it for somebody individually, right? And this is a whole different way of asking questions and developing a relationship. So this isn't sort of just, okay, I've been there, right? I've bought plenty of products and services where, person's like, hey, how are you doing? Blah, 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 a little small talk. And then it's like, well, you really need to upgrade to Oracle 8.4. It's like, you don't even know who I am or what I'm trying to get done, right? And so, there's that old expression, there's a reason God made us with 2 ears and 1 mouth, right? And teaching people how to effectively qualify and ask the right questions is part of this discipline. So here's just this is a sort of direct comparison, right, of a traditional funnel model within an intelligent sales pipeline. You know, they both really require good, strong positioning and a value prop. And even in the intelligent sales pipeline world, you still need an effective website, but you can't rely just on a website to generate new business. You've got to be much more proactive than that. And so the two models are very different, because in an intelligent sales pipeline world, you may be reaching out to them before they find you. And some people will say, well, that sort of interrupts them. Yeah, it might interrupt them, but if it's something that they actually have a need on, you just saved yourself and them a lot of effort and time in trying to make a connection. So in the intelligent sales pipeline world, you know, we value quality over quantity of leads. I talked about having scoring people based on how well they fit your idea of an ideal customer. Very minimal leads wasted. You know, key metrics in an intelligent sales pipeline world. You know, yes, we care about how many people visit our website every month, but what we really care is how many people take action when they come to our website. Not just visitors, but those who turn into actionable leads. So these are people that pick up the phone and call you. They'll fill out a form. They'll ask to be on your newsletter list. So they've taken proactive action. They saw something there that was interesting to them. And here's what happens is that you start to generate a much higher volume, higher percentage of qualified leads. And when salespeople, when you pass these on to your sales organization, you're going to find that instead of closing, you know, 1 or 2 or 5 or 10%, you may be closing 25 or 30%. I actually have a client that's closing 38% of their actionable leads today. I mean, that's a blowout number, right? It means that everything that we're doing is working very hard for your business, and we're doing it cost effectively with obviously trying to do it with efficiency. So, you know, traditional sales funnel, you know, you dump in 10,000 web visitors, you'll get, you know, 300 that might be qualified. Sales says, you know, out of that 300, really only 100 are good leads, and then they close 10% of those. So this is kind of typically how most organizations, if you actually mapped out and they had the data, this is how the metrics would work around a traditional funnel. In an intelligent sales pipeline, we don't start with 10,000. We start with 100 targeted buyers. We get 50 qualified. 40 out of the 50, the sales organization says, yeah, these look like really good prospects. They close 10 of those. So you say you got to 10 closed leads, but you got there more quickly, more effectively. Your customer acquisition costs are much lower. You have a much happier sales force because they're not plowing through, you know, thousands of names to try to find people who are actually good qualified prospects for you. And, you know, nothing like a great case study to make the case. So I've been working for several years as the fractional CMO for a company in Bloomington. And, you know, they, before I started working with them, they were very, very much of a funnel driven company. You know, they had, their sales conversion rate was actually less than 1%. Their average order was $4,500. And, you know, year over year, their business would go up and down. After we implemented this intelligent sales approach, their qualified leads, their conversion rate actually went up to 25 to 30%. Look what happened to their average order size. It went up tenfold, which had incredible gross margin impact, right? So we're spending less dollars qualifying better prospects, and we're generating higher dollar value for the effort, which had a tremendous impact on the business. In fact, you know, that business has grown 20% the last 2 years in an industry that has only typically grows 1%. So they were awarded this year. They've won 3 huge awards. They won 2020 Manufacturer of the Year from the Maine Industry Association. They won the Twin Cities Business Manufacturing Excellence Award in September. And actually doing an interview later this morning. They're a finalist for the Minneapolis-St. Paul Business Journal Manufacturing Excellence Award, which will get awarded in December. So you say, well, gosh, does this really work? Absolutely, it works. I mean, this is a case study, but it's representative of the kinds of impact that thinking about an intelligent sales pipeline can have on your organization. Now, I like to say, hey, time is now, within Chief Outsiders, we tell our clients, don't sit around and wait for the health crisis to end. You need to be proactive now. You need a plan for what you're going to do when we have some tailwind in the economy. And historically, if you look at data from the Boston Consulting Group, companies in a recession who come out quickly and strongly outperform their competitors by 15% on an ongoing basis. That's like stealing 15% market share. And the companies that I've worked with, we have not cut back on marketing during the health crisis. We've continued to go forward with the intelligent sales pipeline and the growth plans that we have in place. We've modified them because some industries that were attractive to us before are going to be slower coming out of the health crisis. Some that we were in sort of are growing very, very quickly, and now we're making those a priority. So this is really a good time to kind of look at productivity improvements, revenue management, growth planning, and make sure that you've got a plan to come out of this health crisis as strongly as you possibly can. By the way, 3 customers that I have are, they would say, well, yeah, it was kind of a tough year in, March, April, or April and May, but 2 out of the 3 are now on mandatory overtime for the rest of the year. They're manufacturers. They have way more demand than they can satisfy with their existing workforce. And the third one is a construction company. In fact, the value prop that I showed you is from that client. And they just won 6 out of 6 awards from the city of Chicago for utility construction. So, when people say, well, oh, woe is me, this is a tough world. Yeah, I fully acknowledge that, right? But your mindset, your attitude, your planning will take you out of this health crisis in a much stronger position potentially than you even went in. And I would really encourage you, the guest on my October radio show is a gentleman named Kyle Arneson, former Marine pilot. He's part of Robert Maxwell's team. And he is the most positive, encouraging guy. I would really encourage you to go. I'll send you the link to the website where you can go listen to Kyle Arneson podcast. But if you need to get picked up or you need to sort of get your teams moving, I really encourage you to listen to Kyle's guidance, because he will tell you there's been no better time to change, modify, build your business than right now. And that's not typically a message that most people are hearing. And, he'll say, look, it's all about leadership and mindset. Now, when we work on sales pipelines, we realize that there are lots of other things that are connected to that. Sometimes, if we rework your value proposition, then we've got to implement that on your website. We build out this ideal buyer profile. Sometimes we need to look at new markets that we might take ourselves into. And we already talked about a new set of metrics to evaluate your pipeline and your progress that you're making. So this is a critical part of most businesses. And one of the things that I like to do is sort of leave you with some other resources that you can tap into. These are all free. And you've got a link to the podcast here, the last one on the Practical CMO. And this is the one I did with Todd Eberhardt on ideal customer profiles. But if you actually go to that site, you'll find the podcast with Kyle Arneson, which is titled Get Moving. 2 most important words that you need to know to come out of the health crisis. And so I really, I'm hoping, I'm at the point in my career and my life where I just like to share back things that I've learned in business. I've been doing that, first part of my career was sort of bringing my business expertise into the church, into faith-based settings. And then I went through a period of really trying to bring faith into the business world. And one of the things that I did at the company I'm in is we started up a prayer team. And what a blessing to be able to meet monthly with, it's a secular company, but there's a number of Christians in the company. And we decided that, we can support each other, we can support the company, we can pray for each other, our families, our clients' success. And so that's been sort of my first part of my life was really sort of business skills into the church, and now it's faith in the business. And I think I'm really entering now kind of a new intersection of faith and business. And, that's exciting for me. I don't know where God's going to take that, but I'm very open to it. So I'm happy to, if you got any questions immediately, this is sort of a high level overview of an approach to revenue management that's very different. You can read more here, you can learn more, we can talk as well. You can call me up and we can chat about what you're doing and how you might think about doing it differently. I like to say different better. So any comments, questions that you'd like to kind of deal with while we've got time this morning?
Mark, I'm just curious, is there a, when you're working with a client, is there a typical client size or profile that, really fits your niche, or, what would describe your ideal client, if that's okay?
Yeah. Okay. Great question, Ryan. Thanks. For me, an ideal client is an organization that recognizes either a growth challenge or a growth opportunity, right? And, after I've done this for so long and in so many businesses, I like to say, there are really sort of 5 different versions of a growth challenge or a growth opportunity. Sometimes we work with companies where their revenues are actually decreasing, right? They're actually on a going out of business track. Sometimes we work with clients that are stagnated. So, they've been at the same size for several years. They can't seem to sort of punch their way up to the next level of growth. There are clients that are growing nominally, maybe they're growing 1 or 2% annually, but their markets are growing much more quickly than that, right? And so, they'll say, well, we're growing, but we're not growing as fast as our market or our competitors. And of course, that over time, that's kind of a going out of business model as well. There are companies who want to grow, like I've got a client in Wisconsin, northern Wisconsin, and the reason they engaged me was because they had been growing at 10% annually, but then after they had a couple of years of like 2 or 3% growth, and they got kind of nervous because when you're in a small town in Wisconsin and you've got a pretty technical manufacturing business, you can't afford to lay off of employees because you might not get them back. And there isn't a huge pool of people to draw from. And so they said, you know what, we'd really like to have a plan where we could grow 10 to 12 to 15% annually. And that would give us a better cushion in case there's an economic slowdown, right? And then here's the last one, and people don't ever think about this one as a growth challenge, but I've seen it many, many times. So a company has a absolute record year, right? I mean, they just knock it out of the park. And then the board and the owners come back and they say, hey, guys, that was just a great year. You did fabulous. Now, what would it take to double this company in 3 years or 5 years, right? So that's a very different kind of a growth challenge. That's really an accelerated growth challenge. And so it's, Ryan, it typically starts with growth. It starts with a need to have a better business strategy going forward, an actual growth plan. And then, often we have to put a marketing strategy and a marketing plan around that, because a lot of businesses sort of do stuff in marketing, but they don't organize it. It's not strategic. They don't measure it. And, you know, in the years where there were a lot of trade shows, which is not this year, of course, but, you know, a lot of times I start up with a new business and say, hey, okay, what are you spending your marketing dollars on? You know, and if they're a manufacturer, they'd spend half their dollars on trade shows. Like, okay, well, what do you get for that? How many leads do you generate? How many convert to customers, right? What's your acquisition cost per customer? And they just kind of look at you and they're like, we should probably know that, right? It's like, well, if you're spending half your marketing budget on it, yeah, you should know it, right? And so there's a lot of times they'll say, you know what, we should probably stop doing that until we can figure out how to do it better. And it's like, great, you know, and we can also think about how we could take your existing marketing spend and use it to work harder for you. Now, you know, I've worked with startups. I've worked with $2 million companies, $4 million companies, 15 million, 40 million, 75 million, 200 million. There's nothing about this approach that's it's either market specific or company size specific, right? I mean, every company needs to generate a targeted pipeline, right? Every business, every organization needs to grow. And so what we try to do is sort of scale how our level of involvement so that even the smaller organizations can benefit from some guidance. You know, we talk about the small, mid-sized business market, but, you know, everybody, Ryan, will give you different parameters for what mid-sized means, right? You know, 15 million to 50 million or whatever it is, but that's where Chief Outsiders has sort of built its business over. We just hit our client number 1,000 a couple of months ago, right? We've been in business for 12 years, and that mid-market is really who benefits a lot, because, you know, they need a higher level of marketing and planning expertise. They don't need a full-time CMO. They couldn't afford a full-time CMO. And so being able to sort of rent us for how much they really need us is a great staffing option for them.
That's helpful. You know, and it's also, you know, you talk about having a marketing budget. I mean, do you find that firms that benefit from your services, you know, is there, and I the reason I ask the question is because I see a lot of P&L, so I get to see how much people spend on marketing. I mean, your opinion, should, you know, what should someone be willing to spend or be comfortable spending in order to really benefit from your guys' services? Is that an easy to answer question, or, you know?
Well, it depends, because, you know, for a lot of clients, we'll go on a monthly retainer for a certain number of months. But for a lot of clients, we'll kind of break things down to sort of individual projects. So sort of rebuilding your positioning and your value proposition, that's a project. You know, doing growth planning for you and laying out a multi-year roadmap of where your opportunities are and trying to size those, that can be a project, right? So, you know, for a lot of the smaller companies, we sort of let them kind of do it piece by piece, because that tends to work better with their budgets and their cash flow.